Welcome back into Live Now from Fox. I'm Austin Westfall. Let's get into the Israel-Hamas war. Joe Biden on Friday said that he expected Iran to attack Israel, quote, sooner rather than later, and warned Tehran not to proceed. The attack could come by Friday or Saturday and target southern or northern parts of the Jewish state, according to the Wall Street Journal, which cited a person familiar with the matter. There's a lot of speculation out there, obviously, but no one truly knows when, if, or how this attack could come. So I want to take a more educational approach to this segment coming up here. We do have Dr. Alon Burstein joining us to talk about Iran's true capabilities in this war. And Iran, and mostly Alon, what we talk about is Iran's proxies during this war. But I first want to ask you, what are Iran's capabilities from a military perspective if we are forgetting about the proxies?
Good to see you, Austin. Iran has a lot of capabilities. Iran has not been involved in a lot of wars where it's thrown its full weight into the war. It was involved, and we can talk about this a little bit later, but it was involved, in skirmishes with Saudi Arabia and in helping the Assad regime in basically repressing the rebellion. With all that, though, it has a very strong military. Iran invests a hell of a lot of its economy and its resources into building up its different military capabilities, and it has invested specifically a lot into its ballistic missile array. It has a wide range of missiles that it can launch pretty much targeting anywhere in Israel. I saw you quote the Wall Street Journal saying it could be northern Israel or southern Israel, but in truth, their missiles can reach anywhere in Israel. Now, that does not mean that they will always succeed. Obviously, Israel has its defense capabilities and intercepting abilities. CNN today also quoted American sources saying that the United States will try to intercept missiles as well. But Iran's military, which is different than the Iranian Revolutionary Guards and what it gives its proxies, the military itself is quite strong. So we're not going to be looking at a ground invasion or anything like that because just geographically, that's probably not going to happen. But the ballistic missile strength and air attacks and drone attacks, Iran could do some serious damage if it launches at least some of its weight into this retaliation.
When was the last time Iran was involved in any type of direct fight?
So there's not been a lot of direct fighting in the sense, again, of like ground troops invading or things like that for many years. I mean, the biggest war was the Iran-Iraq War, but that was in the 1980s. The last time that there was like a major offensive was done in 2019 when Iran launched a series of drones targeting basically areas in Saudi Arabia and different proxies, oil fields, and things like that as part of local skirmishes that were happening at that time. But again, like, we haven't seen them use a lot of their capabilities. Now, it's important to give these warnings because, a lot of people were saying that about Hamas and Hezbollah, right? They also train a lot, but okay, they haven't actually used their force. Iran is not looking, at least at what it appears to be so far, is not looking for regional escalation. It's not looking to now start a regional war on the one hand. On the other hand, it is looking to retaliate both to save face and to show that it is actually supporting the fight against Israel, not just in words and proxies, but also actually throwing its own soldiers in. That said, Iran does not want to war with Israel. Iran has a lot of internal political problems. The economy is not doing well. They're not looking for an escalation right now. Things could spiral out of hand, but we're probably going to see something that, on the one hand, tries to send a message, on the other hand, does not like break the bank and lead to all-out war. Remains to be seen how they're going to try to walk that fine line.
So, we talk so much about the actual capabilities of Iran proper. Let's learn a little more about the proxies because this war has made us even more familiar with a number of Iranian proxies, including Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas in Gaza, and the Houthis in Yemen. Did any of these proxy relationships materialize recently? How long? Here's the better question. How did these relationships materialize initially?
So, in general, when revolutionary regimes come to power, one of the reasons that they're capable of staying in power is because they try to what they call export the revolution. It's the same thing with the way communist revolutions work, right? You take control, but then that's not enough. Then you have to support communism elsewhere. Same thing. When the Ayatollahs took over Iran in 1979, immediately they set up the Iranian Revolutionary Guard and immediately tried to export the revolution. And even in the midst of the Iran-Iraq War, which Iran was not doing well at the beginning, nonetheless, despite that, they invested a hell of a lot in establishing Hezbollah already in 1982, 1983, and more formally in 1985, because it's part of an ideology. And what we're seeing is how it pays off. Because by funding these different militias, and they started Hezbollah in the mid 80s, then they've started to develop militias throughout areas like Jordan and Iraq in the 1990s. Really, it came into full swing, though, with the Syrian civil war and after the invasion of Iraq by the United States, when regimes sort of lose power, when Assad lost power in Syria, or when Saddam Hussein lost power in Iraq, or after Arab Spring in Yemen, when the regime collapsed also, that is when Iran always comes in and sets up its proxies. So really, in terms of the timeline of when these were set up, in each place, it's when the regime was sort of teetering. So in Lebanon, it was 82. The Houthis in Yemen started in 2014, 2015. Different militias in Iraq, already in the beginning of the 21st century, but really starting in like after the rise of ISIS in 2010, something like that. And in Syria in 2011, 2012. So this is all in the last 20 to 30 years, with the exception of Hezbollah a little bit more. And what we're seeing really now in this war, for the first time almost, is how this pays off. Is the fact that Iran has spent so much, billions upon billions of dollars in funding, training, weaponry, all kinds of things. But now they all of a sudden have the capability to achieve what they want, which is if they are attacked, the entire Middle East can go up in flames. The Houthis can retaliate, Hezbollah can retaliate, they have militias in Jordan, Syria, Iraq. That was the vision to set this up, and we're seeing now how they're trying to use it.
Does Iran have a primary proxy? Is one stronger than the others?
Hezbollah is by far the strongest, for many reasons, among others just due to the sheer length of time. Like Hezbollah has been receiving training and weaponry from Iran, like I said, since the mid 1980s. They have, according to estimates, over 130,000 rockets and missiles. If you think about that, I mean that's the size of a small army, if not the not so small army. In addition to very well trained of activists, I'll say that, or operatives, or commando units, or terrorists. Again, it depends on which unit, who have also trained and helped in Syria in suppressing the rebellion. So they're battle hardened, and they can do a lot of damage if they are thrown into a fight. So Hezbollah is by far the strongest. I will say that with that, Hezbollah is also a little bit different than the other militias because Hezbollah is also a political party. It has a terrorist organization, it has a terrorist wing, and it's also a political party in Lebanon. And that complicates things for Hezbollah because while they do answer to Iran in terms of the fighting, they also have to answer to the internal politics in Lebanon. They don't want to be seen as those who brought Lebanon to devastation, which is one of the reasons that they have tried not to enter the war. That's a little bit different than certainly the militias that exist in Iraq and in Syria that have no affiliation with the government, or even the Houthis in Yemen, who themselves are the government. So they don't have the same balance of power. The Houthis in Yemen or the militias in Iraq and Syria, they have no other considerations other than their loyalty to Iran and the Houthis in some cases trying to govern Yemen. But it's different than Hezbollah. They're the strongest, but also they're the ones who probably are going to try to shy away from going into an all-out war because then they'll lose a lot of their grip in Lebanon as well. So, it depends per militia. The ones in Syria and Iraq are sort of the most, I'll say, rogue, just because they don't have any governing considerations. They're not like Hezbollah in Lebanon, not like the Houthis in Yemen.
I want to ask, how autonomous are these proxies? So we always report on them, and we always preface the Houthis or Hezbollah by saying Iran-backed group. Does Iran call all the shots, though, or do they have a bit of autonomy?
So again, it depends on the group. Ironically, Hezbollah is the one that actually answers the most to Iran, and this is also due to the history that Iran actually established Hezbollah, which is different than the other ones that were sort of local organizations that then Iran gave its blessing to, like in Iraq or things like that. Hezbollah is actually just an arm of Iran. Hezbollah does not do what Iran does not tell it to do. That said, right, obviously Iran doesn't actually say, okay, fire this missile on this day, but Iran does say escalate now, de-escalate now, retaliate now, don't retaliate now. That is all orders that are coming from Iran directly. The Houthis in Yemen, slightly more autonomous, mostly because they control Yemen. So, like, unlike Hezbollah, that also is dependent on Iran for everything, the Houthis in Yemen have more control of territory, so they govern certain territory. So, to a large extent, they're a little bit more autonomous, but they still rely on Iran for a lot of weaponry and a lot of diplomatic support and a lot of funding. So, in that sense, they're a little bit more autonomous. Then you have the different militias in Iraq and in Syria who, on the one hand, are very beholden to Iran. On the other hand, they're also much more rogue because unlike Hezbollah or the Houthis, they themselves are not even sitting like in a specific place in a capital or something like that. They're mobile. They are governing certain territory, then they move around. So on the one hand, they're more rogue, and they have less of their own funding or governing or things like that. But also, it's harder for Iran to control them because, like I said, they're not dependent on Iran in the same way that the Houthis are or Hezbollah is. So, if it sounds complicated, it is because each one of these militias is its own sort of developed in its own way, and the leaders occasionally are also assassinated, and then a new leader comes up. He's a little bit more beholden or less beholden. So it really depends. But Iran, if it wants to, it can activate all the militias. And if it wants to, it can restrain most of the militias. It's just a question of different ones, like listen to Iran in the moment or listen more to the general guidance. Remains to be seen if Iran though is going to do this through militias or attack itself. A lot of the speculation is that Iran's going to carry out the attack itself because it actually wants to show that we're not using our militias. When we are attacked, as Iran sees that they were attacking the consulate in Damascus, when we are attacked directly, we retaliate directly. And now you're dealing with us. Remains to be seen if they're actually going to stand behind that statement.
And we can't stress enough that we do not have a time frame. We do not have a way of attack. We do not know anything about how this will go down quite yet. All we do know is that the Middle East is on high alert as we head into the weekend. Alon, we're going to leave it there for now. Take care. Have a good weekend.
Thank you. Have a good weekend.
All right. Let's slide away for a quick commercial break. We're back in 2 minutes.